Hey guys, my name is JC, and today we're going to be playing Jinnie Fay Jetmir 2nd. This is a token deck that looks to accumulate value using all sorts of tokens until it can finish its opponents using the tokens that Jinnie generates. If you think this deck might be the one for you, make sure to stop by the channel where we have a deck tech discussing all of the included cards as well as the overall strategy. Let's see if Jinnie Fay can make token decks something to be feared. So it looks like we're playing Mishra, Artificer, Prodigy, Ziatora the Incinerator, and Jodah, Archmage Eternal. Now if we look at our opening hand, I actually like it quite a bit. We have 2 lands, but we have turn 1 ramp. Parallel Lives is powerful on its own. Elemental Bond for card draw, and Circle of Dreams Druid's going to be a great mana dork, so we'll definitely hold on to this. Ziatora displays a tap land, and they're able to scry 1 off of that, and that's going to be it for their turn. Jodah displays a tap land for turn, and they also leave it there. We draw a land for turn, so that's really great. So we'll start by playing our Bountiful Promenade, and then we'll get down our Elvish Mystic. And that's us for the turn. Mishra plays a land, and that's it for them. Ziatora plays a land, and now they cast a Talisman of Resilience. And that's it for them. Jodah plays their second land for turn. They have it come into play untapped, and now they cast a Soul Ring. And then they cast a Sylvian Caryatid. So that was quite a strong ramp turn for them. And in Jodah, that's exactly what you want to do. And they leave it there. Okay, we draw a Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. So we can definitely fix our green colors, but we'll try not to play that too early so we don't help the Ziatora player or the Jodah player either. So I think we'll actually start here by playing our Forest for turn. And then we're actually going to get down our Circle of Dreams Druid so we can start having it tap for multiple mana ASAP. But otherwise, we're going to leave it there. Mishra plays a land. And now they cast an Arcane Signet. Ziatora plays a land. And now we have them cast Goreclaw, Terror of Khal Sisma. Creature spells you cast with power 4 or greater cost 2 less to cast, and whenever Goreclaw, Terror of Khal Sisma attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. And they leave it there. Jodah starts by casting a Tireless Tracker, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under their control, they can make a clue token, and when they crack a clue, it gets +1/+1. So they play a land for turn and they sack it immediately. That will trigger their Tireless Tracker, making 2 clue tokens. And now they crack one of those clue tokens to draw a card, and the Tireless Tracker gets a 1/1 counter. And that's their turn done. So that's good for us. Our Circle of Dreams Druid has survived a round of the table, which is really good to see. And we also draw an Adeline, which is a very, very good card in this deck. So we have a few choices. I think the first thing we'll definitely do is play our Overgrown Farmland first. Now we can play Adeline here and try to start getting a creature board state developed a little bit faster, which is going to be really good for Circle of Dreams Druid. But the Ziatora player and the Jodah player both have blockers, so we're not going to get as much value out of it at the moment. We do also have the choice here of just playing our Tendershoot Dryad and starting to make Saprolines every turn, really feed into our Circle of Dreams Druid. So I actually like the Tendershoot Dryad plan a little bit better, so let's start with that. We'll tap our Dreams Druid for 2 mana, and that way we can get some blockers down. But otherwise, we're going to leave the turn there. And if we can manage to keep our board state intact, I think we're going to be pretty far ahead of our opponents, especially when we get Parallel Lives and Elemental Bond down. So our Tendershoot Dryad triggers on the Mishra player's upkeep. Now Mishra plays a land. And now they cast Dak Faden. +1, target player draws 2 cards and discards 2 cards. -2, gain control of target artifact, which it looks like they're doing now on the Jodah player's Soul Ring, so they're not going to be happy to see that going through. And if they get to its ultimate, you get an emblem with, whenever you cast a spell that targets 1 or more permanents, gain control of those permanents. But it looks like they're leaving it there. Tendershoot triggers again on the upkeep. Ziatora casts their commander. Ziatora the Incinerator. It's flying at the beginning of your end step. You may sack another creature. When you do, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasure tokens. Now they move to combat. Let's see if they swing in with Goreclaw here. They do, and they're coming in towards us. That does trigger Goreclaw, so now it becomes a 5/4 with trample. We're just going to take the damage here. The bodies are a lot more important to us at the moment. So we take the hit and go to 35. Now we move to Ziatora's end step. Let's see if they sack the Goreclaw here. And they do. Now let's see where they put the target towards, and they do put it towards our Tendershoot Dryad. And that's their turn done. So now the Jodah player starts by casting Omnath, Locus of Creation. When it ETBs, it draws a card, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, add red, green, white, and blue mana, and if it's the third time, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. Now they play a land which triggers Omnath and Tireless Tracker, so they make a clue token, they gain 4 life, and now they cast a Birds of Paradise. Now they do move to combat, and they're swinging the Tireless Tracker in at the Dak Faden, so a little bit of revenge for that stolen Sol Ring earlier. They probably won't be able to stop that, so Dak Faden goes down, and that's their turn done. We draw an Ancient Tomb for turn, which is a really good land, so I think we'll start by playing that. Then we'll tap the Ancient Tomb for 2 mana. We'll also tap our Circle of Dreams Druid. That's going to add 6 mana in total, and then we'll start by casting our Elemental Bond. Now we'll also cast our Commander, which is going to draw us a card on ETB. We draw a land. And now I think we'll hold on to the Parallel Lives, just in case it draws a little too much attention towards us. I think this is the time that we actually get down Adeline, which is also going to draw us a card upon ETB. And that's a Skull Clamp, so very strong piece of card draw, but we'll keep that in our hand, especially if a board wipe does happen, we need to be able to rebuild. But I think we're just going to leave it there. We won't go into attacks, there's nothing real profitable, and I don't think it's worth losing our blockers by swinging into Mishra, so let's leave it there. Mishra starts by casting a Thirst for Knowledge, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact card. And they do discard a Cranial Plating. They play a land for turn. Now they play Goblin Engineer. When it ETBs, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. It also has red, tap, sack an artifact, return target artifact card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Well, let's see what they search up here. And they find a Baleful Strix. And now they cast a Riddlesmith. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. But otherwise, that's it for them. Well, I'm interested to see what the Ziatora player has here, because I've never played against this deck before. So they could very well cheat out some very big creatures to start flinging, but they actually start with an Escape to the Wild. Exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play the cards exiled this way until the end of your next turn, and you may play an additional land this turn. Let's see what they've got. A few talismans and some lands, so not too crash hot, but it does allow them to ramp a little further. They do play a land for turn, and a second land as well. Notably, they do have a command beacon, so they can sack it to put their commander into their hand, which is always really good when you have an expensive commander. And now they cast a Twilight Prophet. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the City's Blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's mana value. So now we move to combat. Let's see if they do swing in with their dragon. They don't, they just move straight to end step. And they decide not to sacrifice anything and they leave it there. Jodah starts by casting a Ponder. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order. You may shuffle and draw a card. So they might be digging for some more impactful spells or creatures. And now they cast a Commander Sphere. So just some more ramp and a bit of access to card draw if they need it. Now they play a land for turn. That triggers Omnath and Tireless Tracker. So they'll make a clue. And then they'll gain 4 life. And now they cast their commander, Jodah, Archmage Eternal. You may pay Wooburg rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So now we move to combat. Let's see if they do swing in anywhere. No, they decide to pass through. And that's going to be their turn done. Well, I'm feeling really confident now. We've untapped with our board relatively unscathed. And we drew a Dragon Broodmother for turn. So all of our opponents are tapped out here, and I think we have a real chance to see the power of Adeline, Elemental Bond, and specifically the dog tokens that Jinnie Fay makes here. So we'll start by playing our Rockfall Vale. Now we're going to get down our Parallel Lives. Now we're going to move to combat. We'll send our Adeline over at the Mishra player, because that's probably the most profitable attacks for us, at least in regards to not losing Adeline. And we only need to attack with 1 creature anyway to trigger. So Adeline's ability triggers. We're going to decide to make 3/1 dogs here. And that's going to trigger our Elemental Bond a bunch of times because creatures with power 3 or greater entered the battlefield. So that's going to be 6 cards that we draw there. So we draw a land. Huatli, really strong card draw. Welcome in Vampire, some more card draw, so we shouldn't run out of drawing cards here. A Dragonlair Spider. That's going to be great to keep making tokens. And our last one, a Smother in Tithe. Wow. We definitely had a really good turn there, that's for sure. So now currently Adeline's at 12-4 with Vigilance. They decide to take the damage, so that takes them down to 29. We go to our second main phase. Well, we've certainly got a lot of card draw online, and what we need to be able to keep playing our game plan out is some more mana, so there's only one thing for it. Let's get down this Smother in Tithe. So we'll tap our Circle of Dreams Druid for a lot of mana. That's 12 mana in total. And let's get down this Smother in Tithe. And with the Parallel Lives, that's going to generate us a lot of mana. Now after that, I'll cast our Skull Clamp, and then I'll equip our Skull Clamp to Adeline. And I think that's going to be our turn done. We'll just let the rest of the mana float away. And now Smother in Tithe triggers on our opponent's draw step. They decide not to pay. So this time we're going to decline and make treasure tokens. Because in case a board wipe comes down here, we want to be able to rebuild quickly. And we're going to need the mana to do it. Now Mishra casts Bolas's Citadel. Well, that's quite a powerful card. It also triggers Riddlesmith, so they can draw and discard. Bolas's Citadel, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than its mana cost. And you can tap and sack 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. Now they did draw, so that also triggers our Smothering Tithe again. They don't pay once again, which is really great for us. So let's make more treasure tokens. Now let's see how crazy this turn can get for the Mishra player. They have to really hope that they don't hit lands off the top. Now they cast a Mirror Maid. It can enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment. Let's see if they can't go for their Bolas's Citadel because it is legendary. Because if it wasn't, that would be a really good idea to protect that because it's such a strong card. Now they definitely choose the Smothering Tithe, which makes sense. Now they cast an Expedition map. You can pay 2 and sack it to search your library for any land card and put it into your hand. That also triggers Riddlesmith. They decline to pay again. We will make yet again more treasure tokens. Now they cast Thoughtcast. It has affinity for artifacts and they can draw 2 cards. So they're really feeding our Smothering Tithe here. They have to be careful because we potentially could get to our next turn and win the game, especially with all the card draw we have online. But we're not going to complain about it. So I am going to elect again to make more treasure tokens. So we're up to 10 total treasure tokens now. So we've got quite the amount of resources built up here. And now they cast a Storm the Vault. Whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And if you control 5 or more artifacts, transform it. And it can tap for 1 mana of any color. Or it can tap and add blue for the amount of artifacts you control. Now they also cast a Vidalcan Archmage. So whenever you cast an artifact spell, draw a card. So they certainly have a pretty good turn here at the moment, that's for sure. They've really been able to continuously hit off the top of their Bolas's Citadel, which is great. Now all they need to do is just find an answer to what we're doing and they'll be in a really, really strong position. Now they do play a land for turn, so that's their 1 land done, so they can keep going with Bolas if they need to, but it looks like they just pass through combat and they're moving to their end step now, which triggers their Storm the Vault, and it does transform. So now they have the Vault of Katlakan, and that's their turn done. Now Smothering Tithe triggers for both us and the Mishra player. They very well may not pay here at all just because of how much the tax is going to cost them. Now they don't pay for the first one, and they don't pay for ours either. So I think here now I'm actually happy to make our 3/1 dog tokens to help us start drawing some cards. So we can hopefully dig into a win con and close the game out. So that triggers our Elemental Bond 2 times. We draw an Oran Frostfang, so more card draw. That does trigger our opponent's Smothering Tithe. And we're not going to pay for it here because I think we may be able to close the game out next turn. And a Kasali Slingers. Well, that's an answer to what they're doing over there, so we can start clearing their artifacts out at the very least. They play a land for turn. And now they cast a Talisman of Impulse. And now they cast their own Parallel Lives. So they'll be able to double the treasure tokens they make off their commander. And then they finish up with a Talisman of Indulgence. Now we move to combat. Do they keep their commander back once again? They do. Now their commander triggers on the end step, but they decline its trigger. And that's their turn done. Both Smothering Tithes trigger on the draw step. We'll make our dog tokens once again, which is going to trigger Elemental Bond twice, and it'll also trigger our opponent's Smothering Tithe. We draw a Professional Facebreaker. We'll decline to pay. And we draw a Command Tower. We'll also decline to pay once again. Jodah starts by playing a land for turn, which triggers their Tireless Tracker and their Omnath. So they will gain 4 life from Omnath. Now, being a Jodah deck that plays typically big spells, there is every chance that they may have an answer to what's going on the board at the moment. Or at the very least, they can play some very big impact spell that's going to bring them back into the game. But they start with a Coalition Relic, so just some more mana ramp. And now they cast a Myojin of Seen Winds. It ETBs with a Divinity counter on it if you cast it from your hand. It has Indestructible as long as it has a Divinity counter on it, and remove a Divinity counter from it. Draw a card for each permanent you control. Well, that is definitely a big splashy play. That's going to be a lot of cards that they can draw at any time when they want to. We're just lucky at the moment they don't have really any access to mana, or at least a significant amount of mana to be able to cast off everything they do. And it looks like they're leaving it there, so I think we're getting to our turn. Now we do have to be careful because the Mishra player does have quite a fair bit of mana up, so there is a small chance that they may have a Cyclonic Rift in hand. Let's just hope that's not the case, because I'm not too sure what else they could have that's going to be able to stop us, especially just with the amount of card draw we have online. Now Smothering Tithe does trigger. We have more than enough mana at the moment, so I'll actually use our Ancient Tomb to pay for it here. And we draw into another land for turn. So we'll start by playing our command tower. Then we're going to tap down our Circle of Dreams Druid for a lot of mana. So that'll be 16 mana in total. We'll cast our Kasali Slingers to get rid of the Smothering Tithe first, and then we'll work our way across, probably targeting the Bolas of Citadel next. But it looks like they have a response here. They're tapping out for a lot of their mana. Do we see the Cyclonic Rift come in? No, they cast a Whir of Invention X equals 9. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle. Well, we might see a Darksteel Forge, I believe is the name of the card, that gives all their artifacts indestructible. And indeed, that's the case. So we won't be able to take out their Bolas of Citadel, unfortunately, but we can at the very least take out their Smothering Tithe. So that goes down. Elemental Bond triggers. And we get a Curse of Opulence. Well, the next thing I think we want to do is draw a few more cards. So we're going to start clamping some of these Saprolan tokens. And we draw 2 lands. Well, let's try that again. A Sylvan Library and a land. We'll tap and float our mana from our Mana Dork. And then we're going to unfortunately have to clamp our Elvish Mystic. And now we get a Terror of the Peaks and Tireless Tracker. Well, that's exactly what we want to see. That's one of our very strong finishes. So let's cast our Terror of the Peaks. So now every dog token that we make is going to be able to lightning bolt any target that we'd like. That triggers Elemental Bond to draw a card. Now we draw an Aura Shards. What we'll do next is get down our Dragonlair Spider, because now it's going to put our opponents in a position where every time they cast a spell, they're also going to get zapped for 3 damage. So if anyone storms off, they're going to have a very hard time winning the game that way. So we'll crack our treasure tokens for 2 red, and then the rest into that. That triggers Elemental Bond and Terror of the Peaks. So we'll direct the Terror of the Peaks trigger at the Bolas Citadel player. We can't let them survive too long with a Bolas of Citadel out. It's just too powerful a card. We'll also draw a card off Elemental Bond. And a Growing Rites of Itlamok. Even more mana. Then we'll cast our Growing Rites of Itlamok. It'll also let us dig through some of our cards and see if we find anything else pretty spicy. So that goes through. We have a Dockside Extortionist and a Rumor Gatherer. Well, let's take that Dockside Extortionist. Alright, well let's see, with all these clue tokens hanging around and all of these artifacts, let's just see how big this Dockside Extortionist can get and how many lightning bolts we can make. So we'll tap there and there. Now Dockside Extortionist is normally a very powerful card, but in this particular case it is super, super broken. So I'm just hoping that no one concedes at instant speed. We can at least see some of the effect that it can do. Now it looks like Mishra may have a response here. I think they're tapping their Bolas of Citadel to sacrifice 10 non-land permanents and do 10 damage to each opponent. So they might be trying to go out here in a blaze of glory, which I can respect. And they do. So that also gets rid of some of the artifacts, which is important. So Terra goes through. We'll just go straight to the face with the Mishra player. We'll go and make a lot of dogs here. And that is a lot of triggers on the stack. I almost thought that Magic Online was going to crash then for a second. So we'll put our first trigger there. And let's just sort through all these triggers. And it looks like one of our opponents has conceded, and so has the other one. I think they've seen the writing on the wall. We're going to have more than enough damage to get through, especially when we go to combat. Well, let's go to the review and discuss what happened. So this game was a really strong showing for Jinnie, particularly how she synergizes with tokens and can pivot between them depending on what you need at the time. This was most apparent with Elemental Bond, Jinnie, and Adeline. Being able to draw so many cards from creating dog tokens really set us far ahead and allowed us to draw into our Smothering Tithe and Dockside, which helped us close out the game. The Ziatora player began to get their engines online, but unfortunately their hand was just a little too slow for what the other players were doing at the table. But had the game gone on just a few more turns, I think the value they could have generated off their parallel lives in combination with their commander could have really set them far ahead, but not only that, it would have allowed them to keep the other players in check at the table with their commander's ability. The Jodah player definitely had a strong board position, especially considering all the access they had to card draw and mana advantage, but they just needed more time to realise this advantage, especially considering all the bombs that Jodah decks typically play. The Mishra player was probably in the strongest position of all, resolving that Bolas of Citadel and that Vault of Catlacan, and had the game gone to their turn, I think the rest of the table would have been in serious trouble. But games of Magic are won and lost by a single turn and even a single mana, and we were just lucky enough that we were that one turn quick enough to be able to take the game. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed today's gameplay and got to see what Jinnie Fay is really made of. I'd also love to hear how your Jinnie Fay deck's been going if you've built one yourself, so make sure to let me know. Otherwise, you take care, guys.